All right, hello and welcome to another drive-in double feature. I'm Ryan.
I'm Nathan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about two movies every Tuesday and Thursday. But today, Nathan, we are digging back into that old Toho well. And we're not doing a Godzilla movie, though. This is a completely different one. And that is 1956, Rodan, directed by, get ready for it, Ishiro Honda. He came back.
Mr. Godzilla himself. He's back at it.
Yes. The only reason why I wanted to talk about this, Rodan does show up in other movies, so I wanted to have proper context. And also, too, the movie was completely free on YouTube, so I was like, perfect opportunity. Real easy.
Mm-hmm. And we've watched a lot of movies on YouTube for this show. This is the best quality YouTube movie I've watched. So
I was going to mention that when we talk about it, but this may be like the cleanest transfer I've ever seen on of these movies we've seen.
It really is. Yeah, this is
other than the ones that are already on Blu-ray, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. But Ryan, before we do hop into Rodan, I know we got a little bit of cleanup to do from last episode, right?
Oh, do I ever? Well, Nathan, I mean, we briefly touched on the American version of Godzilla Raids Again, which was Gigantus the Fire Monster, and we could have just left it there, but I wasn't satisfied, Nathan. I had to spend an extra $60 just to get this DVD box set that had the English version in there.
Jeez. Yeah, you sent me pictures of the box set. It's cool. I mean, it's a neat box set, so I say money well spent.
It is, and that way, because the Criterion set, as great as it is, it doesn't include a lot of the English dubs, and I think it's kind of cool to kind of do like a compare and contrast a little bit. So
yeah,
and actually, this one had a really good commentary track, not done by David Klatt like the usual one, but it was still done by a guy that is a big Godzilla fan, and he was actually pretty snarky, and it was kind of funny, like watching him kind of take down a lot of like the real funny like errors that was in this movie, or just real mind-boggling stuff, which I'm going to get into right now. But first fact I want to bring up, we're going to actually go back all the way to the original Godzilla, and going back and counting, do you know how many on-screen deaths there were in that movie?
No.
You want to take a wild guess?
On-screen deaths? Let's say 4.
Oh, Nathan.
Or wait. Are we talking? Is there more? Am I?
You're way undershooting it. I had a couple of digits in there.
Oh, really? Is it like what? Like 200? Are we talking about like people in the city as well?
On-screen deaths that were shown on screen in this movie, and that number would be 106.
106. Wow! Holy crap!
And you know how many was in Godzilla Raids Again?
No, I'm gonna undershoot a guess.
14.
Oh my God! See, that's more like it. That's the right number.
Yeah, just
interesting.
A little too much death in my Godzilla movie. I need a little more family-friendly Godzilla.
And we can really just put that up to is like that movie had less of like those big devastating scenes, so that makes sense.
It was a smaller budget, so showing more deaths meant spending more money. So I'll just chalk it up to that. So Paul Schreibman was the American producer for Gigantus the Fire Monster. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but the main reason why they changed it from Gigantus to Godzilla, because there was kind of like this argument that it may have been for artistic choice, or it could have been they couldn't get the rights to the movie. Well, the guy in the commentary actually references a real interview that Paul Schreibman had, who proudly claimed that he changed Godzilla to Gigantus because he wanted it to be different, because he wanted to have his own standalone franchise and have something where he didn't want the weight of Godzilla like attached to it. But this guy apparently loves changing movies. So that's
Interesting.
That was 100% choice. He could have gotten the name, but he chose not to call this movie Godzilla, despite Godzilla being the fourth highest grossing foreign movie at that time.
I guess he wanted to make it his own, even though he was taking movies and just dubbing them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of him wanting to change things, so one other mistake in the movie we pointed out was that Motoyoshi Oda's name was spelled Motoyoshi QDQ.
Mm-hmm.
Some other notable ones was Minoru Chiaki was changed to Mindru Chiaki. Writer Shigeru Kayama was changed to Shijim Kayama. And Eiji Tsuburaya, the special effects wizard, becomes LG Tsuburaya. Paul Schreibman's name, who is longer than most of those people, spelled perfectly correct.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's weird, though. Couldn't they have just... I don't know.
That's just laziness on my part. I mean, like, they could have easily gotten, like, a list or whatever. I mean, I don't know what that could have caused.
Yeah, right.
So other notable changes in this movie that he decided to add just for no reason at all. The American version actually features constant narration.
Nice. Wonderful.
So if you ever thought this movie didn't have enough talking in the Japanese one, well, I got news for it. Whenever the people are not talking in Godzilla Raids Again, they just have narration overdubbed on top of it, describing exactly what you can see happening on screen. There's a scene in there where when Godzilla and Anguirus fall in the water and the water starts bubbling up, and it says, and they fell into the water, spouts of bubbling foam, and it literally shows bubbling foam in the water. So
they must have really thought the American audience was stupid or something. Like, you got to tell them what's going on. That's awful.
I guess they felt like this movie is way too confusing. This movie with two giant monsters fighting is just way too heady for American audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Other things is constant stock footage. They had stock footage of nuclear blasts, things like that. Another one was they put random scores into this movie. Like, they pulled scores from other movies. So, like, do you know the movie It Came From Beyond Another Planet or whatever, that title? They took the score from that movie and put it in this movie. So they decided to erase the score that was already in the movie and just decided to put scores from other B movies like into this movie.
That's so odd. Why would you do that? It seems like it makes it much harder. It's easy. The score is there for you.
That's what you would think. I mean, I'm assuming they did that. I don't know why they did that, because they still credit the original composer for this movie, despite almost none of his I said like 20% of his score is actually in the movie.
Bizarre. The Gigantus is a bizarre piece of like movie history.
Another funny piece of dialogue is one of the characters says, "Trying to please a woman is like swimming in the ocean."
Yes. I don't see the issue with that. What's wrong with that? I get it.
Yeah, no,
it's like banana oil. I say it all the time.
So, okay, I'll go ahead and bring up that point. So he brings up the banana oil line in there too. And supposedly during the screenings of the movie, when that scene played where they actually said banana oil, that actually got a big laugh. Okay, gotcha. And not because it was meant to be comical, but it was just more so, even back then in the 50s, that was like a really outdated phrase. Yeah, and
they were like, that's what my grandpa says or something.
Pretty much. And they said the reason why they went with that line of dialogue is just because it matched the lip movements a lot better. Because in the Japanese movie, he says, baka, like idiot or whatever. So it makes a B noise. So they say banana oil. Yeah. So in the sequel, in the original movie, the two pilots immediately recognize that it's Godzilla because this is a sequel. And in this one, they're like, I don't know who those two monsters are. So they remove all references to Godzilla beforehand. They use Anguirus's roar for Godzilla. Like, they just decide to replace Godzilla's roar and put Anguirus's there for some reason. Weird. Just because. Mm-hmm. But probably another piece of funny dialogue was they called it the oxygen destroyer because it destroys oxygen.
Nice. Yeah. Wow. Revelatory. Beautiful.
Another funny thing in there was they had like Japan as like this really backwards country. So instead of like showing the scenes where it's like Japan's like this real bustling cities, they had them like working out the farmlands and the rice fields. Just it's like, oh, look how weird Japan is, that type of thing.
Gotcha. Like almost like a curiosity kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. They also included in one of the special features the original radio ad for Gigantus, which was actually double billed with another movie called Teenagers from Outer Space. My final thing I'll bring up, which I know there's a lot, I'm sorry, but
You're fine.
the final thing I want to bring up was so in the right after the Godzilla is first seen and raids again, you remember the scene where the scientists are kind of all sitting around, they're talking about the two dinosaurs and that sort of thing, and then they show Godzilla destroying the city.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they still have that, but before that, they actually show they're like they had to explain how these monsters were created. So one of the original scenes that they actually made was they made this little diorama set, and it was supposed to be like a recreation of how these dinosaurs were formed, and it showed like a bubbling pool of water, and this little tiny dinosaur toy like came like peeking above the water, like it was like a little like dinosaur like toy action figure, and I'm guessing that's supposed to be the real thing. and it's on like a little string too, you can see it being pulled up from the water. And then they show like live lizards walking on the set, and that's supposed to be, I guess, prehistoric. And then the also too was these there's a scene of these two guys in giant rubber T-Rex costumes, and that's supposed to be show dinosaurs walking among the earth.
Nice.
But all in all, Gigantus was panned, and it was not a success in America. So
probably a good thing that it wasn't called Godzilla then, because it could have ruined the reputation of the Godzilla franchise over here for a while.
Absolutely. And, it did, Godzilla was kind of, he did have international recognition, but he really wasn't that superstar until we get later, until we get into our next Godzilla film. But that is it for my cleanup. I'm sorry for that one running a little long, but there was a lot I wanted to say about that.
No, you're good. You're good. It seemed like Gigantus was a whole deal. Maybe one day we could actually just cover it later on down the line.
Yes, maybe so. But Nathan, we got another movie we got to talk about here, and that is Rodan.
Yeah, we do. We got to talk about Rodan, but I think someone special has a little bit to say about it, right?
Absolutely. So my dad was actually the one who introduced me to Rodan when I was younger. We actually rented it from a video store when I was younger. So I actually called him up and I did a little mini interview with him and just asked him if he can recall some of his thoughts and memories of this movie. And we're actually going to play that for you right now.
So tell me, so you've seen the movie Rodan, right?
I did, yes, I've seen it.
And how long ago did you first see it?
It was probably early 60s, might have been the late 50s and everything. It was in black and white, I remember that.
Okay. Now the movie was originally in color, so was it the theater and was it in black and
white? No, this was an older movie. I watched it on television.
Oh, okay. I thought you saw it in the theater.
No, I watched Godzilla, Godzilla versus Rodan. All of those, they came a lot of times on Saturday. There was movies like that. Movies like, the Peapods where they took over the Body Snatchers and stuff like that, all kinds of movies, and all of them were in black and white.
Now, what do you remember about the movie Rodan?
I just remember when he flew and when he would go airborne and everything, it would create such a wind torrent or whatever. It would blow things down and things like that because he was so big and I guess had a big sort of wingspan and everything, to where he could get a lot of air movement and everything.
Right, and that happens a lot in the movie. He flies so fast that he kind of creates like a sonic boom.
Yeah, sonic boom, and it's almost like a tornado-like effect where it shatters houses and things of that nature.
Now, I remember my first memory of this movie being when you showed it to me on VHS, because I think we rented it from Blockbuster or something like that. But
yeah,
do you remember why you showed it to me?
No, I don't. Do you remember?
Well, I just remember. I don't know if you remember, but you were the first one to show me like one of those types of movies before. I think King Kong versus Godzilla was the one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those were movies that I watched when I was a kid, because there wasn't a lot of movies. They had people, I guess, getting killed in them and things like that, but there wasn't, murders and all this kind of stuff in a lot of the movies today. It was, and you knew that it wasn't real by, the houses. You could tell that they were made up, and all that. Might have been miniatures and things of that nature. But it was in black and white. They had them on television quite frequently, because that's back when we only got at that time there was only two channels, CBS and NBC, and then in the early 60s ABC came on, and they came on in color, and that changed everything.
Do you remember what your first color movie was?
I believe it was something like Darby O'Gill and the Little People, or something. It was a Disney movie, because Disney was real. They were big and everything. They had a regular show on the weekends, and they would have a movie and things.
Okay, well, cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to add about the movie, or anything that you loved about it, or anything else you just want to add? Any other comments?
Well, the thing, I know the earlier ones and everything, you could tell that the people were speaking in Japanese, but they were, they had whatever they call it, where somebody's interpreting it and everything, like they're speaking English, but you could tell that they were probably speaking their native language and everything.
Yeah, that was very prevalent in those types of movies. And actually, the English version of this movie has been available for the longest time, and you wouldn't be able to see like the actual spoken language until much later, until like the early 2000s, because that was the only way you could see it. But now both versions are readily available, so you can see.
Yeah, they dubbed in the English, over. I might say a word, and then their mouth might, the same thing. They might have to move their mouth a little more and everything to say it in their language, so you could tell.
Well, I'm sure back then people were a lot more apprehensive to reading subtitles as they are now.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime.
All right. That was it. That was what my dad thought of it. And, it's always really fun hearing his experiences with movies, just because it was from like a different time. So I always love hearing stories like that.
No, same here. It's crazy to think how much times have changed in under like 100 years, even, because like he talked about like, oh, when I was growing up, we only had 2 TV channels, which to me is a completely bizarre concept, So it's nice to hear that. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was more than willing to talk, and maybe we'll have to get some more of his memories on when we start covering movies that he remembers actually seeing in the theater. But Nathan, let's dig right into Rodan. Nathan, what did you think of Rodan?
Rodan, it's better than Raids. I will say that. I do think it's better than Raids. I actually thought it was a fun movie. It was a pretty fun movie. I guess to give my whole thoughts, I think it was a little slow to get to its point, to get to the enjoyable bits. But when it gets going at the end, I think it really gets going, and I really enjoyed it. What about you? What did you think about Rodan?
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I honestly, I forgot how much I enjoyed it, because it's been a minute since I've seen that one. And Rodan was just kind of, what I really loved is kind of like the mystery. I mean, I know you said it kind of takes a while to get started, but I actually kind of liked the slower build up to it, because if you weren't aware of what Rodan was, which we didn't say, but Rodan is a giant pterodactyl. Yeah. So you're kind of waiting for this giant pterodactyl to show up. But halfway through the movie, it's pretty much just these miners, coal miners, not young people, dealing with these
young children.
Yeah, exactly. Dealing with these giant bug monsters, which are actually dragonfly larvae that are actually really big and have these pincers. And it kind of shows them going down into the mine, and people are mysteriously dying. And you think that's going to be like the big monster that they're going to have to deal with throughout this entire movie. But really, that's like a big swerve, because they kind of swerve you at the end, and Rodan is the true antagonist of the movie.
Yeah, I guess that did get me, because the whole time I've seen the poster, I know what Rodan is, and I'm like, okay, so we're looking at like worm larvae. We got like little babies eating little worms and stuff like that. When are we going to get to Rodan? And then he does show up. I just don't know what it was. It's not like it was bad, because they always talk about, in the monster movies, human interest. That's, that can be some of the weakest bits. And I don't think this is the weakest. I think Raids is much weaker. At least the main miner, he gets like amnesia. You have a little bit of that interest there. But they definitely do try building up that mystery, because, weird stuff is going on in the mines. There's flooding and stuff like that.
You see, I actually would disagree. I think the humans in Raids Again was actually a little stronger than those.
You think so?
Because in my opinion, yeah, just because I actually can think of personality traits of Raids Again, and Rodan, it's really hard, and I can't really even think of like what the character's names was. I mean, I know like Goro was like one of the people lost in the mine they couldn't find ever.
But he's like not in the movie.
Yeah, you never even see his dead body show up.
No.
Speaking of that, 36 kills in this movie.
36. Okay, so we got a little bit more and a little bit less.
Yes.
Which is I mean, not to jump the gun on Rodan, but his destruction in this, love it. I love his destruction. It is great. It's
top notch.
Yeah.
It really is. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, I just don't feel like the humans were that strong in this one. And I couldn't really tell you like a personality trait, but the scene where the guy actually remembers, because he is the first person to actually see Rodan, and he sees Rodan hatching from its egg. And that is 100% my favorite scene in this movie.
Yeah, that scene's really good. That's the scene I keep thinking about. I also keep thinking about, there's this really great scene where one of our main characters, he goes down the mine shaft, and there's like green screen behind him as he like goes down it. Something about the look of that is really cool. The sets in this one, I think, are top notch. And maybe we spend a little too much time in the coal miners area, but I do think it at least looks really nice. So great work there.
Yeah, it's actually really good. I felt like they spent a lot of times on sets and miniatures. I mean, the miniatures in there, I mean, you got to realize, like, Rodan, so he's a giant pterodactyl, so he just kind of flies, and he doesn't actively destroy any buildings. All he does is Rodan kind of flies so fast that it destroys the buildings, because it releases this giant sonic boom.
Yeah, it's crazy because Rodan, like the whole like end of the movie is him kind of like versus like jet fighters, which is I think that's really cool that there's a giant dinosaur that is as fast as our planes. So it's not the idea like, oh, the planes can come in, surround it, and take it out. It's one-on-one with our planes. He even has like a smoke trail and everything. It's actually pretty cool.
I actually thought that was a great reveal because you don't know what the monster is at that point. You don't know that it's a giant pterodactyl. So you just see, like you said, its kind of jet stream from in the sky. And they're like, there's this unidentified flying object, and you don't know if it's an alien or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you just see like the giant pair of wings like come out and hit this fighter jet. And then in the very next scene, you see the helmet, and it's just splattered with blood.
Yeah, I also want to say we talked about how high quality this cut is. I don't know if I think it might be just a little too high quality because I can see Rodan strings, which I'm not gonna ding this movie for that. I really don't care. I know it's fake, but it's definitely like
it's fake?
It's very clean. I know it's not real. Movies aren't real.
I thought they got a real giant pterodactyl.
Yeah, the actor, the one giant pterodactyl actor, was actually on set for the dinosaurs show. Was not available for this, even though that show was 30 years later. But
yeah, Earl Sinclair was ahead of its time.
It really was.
But no, I agree. It's the transfer is very clean, but almost to its detriment, just because this is an older movie. And I would imagine, like, when you're watching a movie like this, you would have like that film grain, so you'd have like the little black lines kind of going down the screen, so strings probably wouldn't be that noticeable. And I'm sure 1950s directors weren't thinking HD was going to be a thing.
Exactly, and like thinking your dad watching it on a small TV in black and white, it's definitely hidden there. That's the thing. The Blu-ray transfers nowadays and stuff. You do have to think about: do you keep the film grain or do you just take it out completely? It is what it is. I mean, just as people that watch old time movies, we do just have to keep that in mind, that we see these behind the scenes stuff, but for years people weren't seeing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think the special effects, even by those standards, I think was probably really great. And even just those little miniatures, like I said, were really cool looking. And they actually used little figures, and they did a little stop motion. Like when one of the larvae grabs one of the men, they can kind of see like the stop motion movement with that, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the little tanks and they have the miniature city, and there's like little toy tanks that are rolling out. I think that looked really cool. Just the whole miniature, like seeing it get destroyed. There's like signs crushed down, buildings like just rubble. It does that aspect, which is like, I want to see a Godzilla. I want to see a giant monster movie to see that destruction. And this one hits it right on the nose. So I was having a good time there.
Yeah. And it is weird though. I mean, this movie is Rodan, but I clocked it. You don't see Rodan until about 45 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
And I mean that at that point, the movie is almost 2/3 done.
Yeah, because it's only an hour 22. I thought the same. I was keeping track. I knew it was somewhere around like 50 minutes because I remember looking at the time and being like, okay, wow. And I guess there is that suspense. I just don't think for me, it wasn't strong. I guess it's my problem comparing it to maybe Godzilla, which I feel like had more of a dread buildup. And Rodan, it was more, I guess I just didn't feel that dread. I wasn't scared to see him pop up. I wasn't like, what's going to happen kind of deal.
And Godzilla, I mean, that one, they really tease you early on with Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla pops up in the first 15 minutes of that movie. And then you get these little tastes of him throughout the entire movie. And then that's kind of like this big destruction scene at the end. But when Rodan does show up, it's nonstop.
Yeah, he's in it for the rest of the movie. Yeah, which is great because just seeing this puppet that they use, it's really cool. It probably took a lot of work to get this thing looking like it's flying, and it looks good. I want to say like the flapping of the wings and everything. It's really great work.
Yeah, and we actually get a suit actor in this one, and it's played by Nakajima, the Godzilla actor.
Oh, so he's Rodan as well.
He's also Rodan, yes.
Nice. So how often is it a man in the suit versus like, I know, because I know it's a puppet and a man in the suit. And I want to know like the comparison about how much he was in it.
I mean, you can kind of tell. I mean, because especially when you see his little feet kicking. I mean,
Yes.
Obviously that's a man in a suit. The scene where he's he's flying perfectly horizontal, like a superhero. I mean, that's obviously that's like a little model. That's not a real person. And I looked up a fact that it said like the scene when Rodan actually falls into the water, that the cable snaps, and supposedly that was Nakajima like actually falling into the water. But I actually went back and rewatched that scene, and to me it looks like a model because it's perfectly stationary. There's no bodily movements from any type of human type of movements or thrashing, so that makes me believe it probably was a model. But I have read stories on that scene where Nakajima was lifted like 10 feet or 5 feet in the air, and there was an incident where the cable did snap and he fell and really hurt himself just falling directly onto the set floor.
He's like, I'm never doing one of these flying things again. Get me out of here.
That's what you think.
I know. God, I mean, it was a different time. People getting hurt and everything in those days. He probably just hit the ground and was like, I'm back at it. Let's keep filming. Well,
I mean, that's what they said in Jackie Chan. It was either you got back up or you lost your job. So
yeah. That's cool. I didn't even realize. So it's basically a Godzilla reunion, but with Rodan.
Yeah, I mean, as we go further into the series, they reuse a ton of actors, so there'll be lots of familiar faces popping up. And Nakajima is pretty much the main guy in the Godzilla costume. So
that's already been happening. My Letterboxd years roundup. It lists like the most actors you've watched in a year. It's all like Godzilla Raids Again, like actors and actresses. So by the end of the year, it's going to be a Godzilla year, Toho monster movie year.
What a banner year for you and your Letterboxd.
I know.
So one thing I do want to bring up is the cause of why Rodan shows up. And in the movie, they imply again that it was from the H-bomb testing.
They did?
Yeah. So
okay.
They said in the movie that it may have been due to hydrogen bomb testing. And it could be, they're like, okay, well, we know that it affects, the land and sea, but does it affect the Earth's crust as well? And maybe this is a reason why. They didn't say it as 100% fact. And the other reason could have been that the miners were kind of digging too low, and they found this monster there and it kind of awakened it type of thing. So they didn't really give like an explicit reason like in Godzilla where they actually said it was nuclear testing that did it. But just one thing I wanted to point out, that H-bomb was mentioned again.
Yeah, I mean, definitely still like that it's leaking through. But I wonder if they made it less of a thing, because I completely forgot about that. Made it more subtle because were more monster movies like this coming out in the wake of like Godzilla? Was it like becoming a more commonplace thing of like, oh, there's just a giant monster?
There was a giant monster like that, but I mean, some of them were outright, this is because of nuclear testing, because there's another movie that comes out called The H-Man, and it's a man that turns into a monster due to hydrogen bomb testing. So that it becomes a recurring theme. So it wouldn't surprise me. But as the Godzilla series goes along, it's just mainly real mythical type of creatures that are just popping out of nowhere.
Gotcha.
Is there any particular scenes or anything else you liked about this movie?
I'm thinking I really liked they have a scene with like almost a baby pterodactyl, and it eats like a little tiny animatronic worm. There's something about that I love, because everything is fake. It's a fake set. Got that fake pterodactyl, the fake little worm. It looks like like a toy set, but it looks like so much work and craft went into that. I really like that. I like the scene where he recalls after, he gets amnesia, he sees everything. That scene's really good. I think his acting is really good in that scene.
It is. I mean, he looks so petrified in there. And the shot that I think about the most is, besides Rodan showing up, is they do like this extreme close up on the guy's face. And it's a really like claustrophobic type of shot. And you can just see the terror in his eyes, seeing this giant pterodactyl hatching right in front of him.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, I like towards the end, whenever Rodan's attacking the city, that they point out that Rodan is more the name of the creature than just him, right? Because there is a second Rodan, and they're just like, oh, there's another Rodan coming in. And then it's like, oh, okay, so it's not like he's got a personality. That's Rodan. Those type of creatures are Rodans. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
It's an easier way of saying like its actual name. And so in Japan, like its actual prehistoric name is Rodon, I believe is how you pronounce it.
That's really close to pterodactyl, though. I get that.
But in Japan, he's not called Rodan in the original movie. He's actually pronounced Rodon, which is Radon. But they changed it for American markets because there was actually a brand of soap at that time called Rodon.
Gotcha.
So they wanted to avoid confusion. So it's Rodan now. And it stuck, just like Godzilla. It wasn't meant to be called Godzilla, but it stuck. So
wow, interesting. And I mean, that's cool that they actually, when this did get brought over to America, that they called it Rodan. They didn't change it to some dumb stuff like Gigantus or anything. But I'm sure the American version is its own mess in itself.
Yes, and maybe one day I'll have to watch that one as well. But I do know they call Rodan the fire creature, so it's the fire breathing or fire demon, something like that.
That's right. Yeah, I think I saw that on a poster somewhere where that's not really the deal. He like shoots like subsonic wind out of his mouth, but it's not fire.
He kind of has his own little atomic breath type of thing, like Godzilla does, but it's not as potent as Godzilla's.
How does Rodan stack in the monsters? Like, in your opinion, out of like Godzilla's foes or any of the monsters, is Rodan like a higher tier one or a lower tier one? Would you say?
Oh, definitely higher tier. He's not. So I mean, kind of like the top 5, I want to say, for these Toho monsters are going to be, Godzilla, Anguirus, Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah. Those are the 5 that you're going to see the most out of any creature in here. So those I would consider like the top ones of Toho. There'll be some other appearances by other lesser known ones that we may cover one day. Like Varan, he's like a flying like lizard monster looking thing. So there's that one, and there's all kinds of other ones that we're probably going to talk about. But Rodan is definitely in like the upper echelon of like Toho monsters.
Yeah, I actually like Rodan. I like his design. I think he's really cool. I think the posters do not do him justice. If you look up the posters for Rodan, they make him look like a Disney cartoon character. Like he looks like
Pete's dragon. He looks like that.
Yeah, it looks so silly. Especially I think the very end of the movie when he gets like burned alive, man. It's another scene like Godzilla where you think like in the end is like, okay, he's just a creature and he has to die like this. This is kind of awful.
I thought the scene was great. I loved the tone of it at the end. My only gripe, which is so they kind of ignite the volcano, kind of hoping that it's going to stop the 2 Rodans, and it's implied that the volcano, like magma or lava, one of them got caught in the eruption, but it really wasn't super clear that happened. It was kind of flying in the smoke, and it looked like it was fine, and then all of a sudden it just went like just kind of floated to the bottom. I'm like, why is it?
I agree. I agree. It's a bit odd.
So I had to look up, and they're like, oh, it was caught in the eruption, and then it fell to its death. And I'm like, it didn't really, though. It looked like it was flying just fine, and then it just decided to go down. But the second Rodan, he or she was wanted to be near its fallen, I guess, sibling or mate, whichever deal it is, and actually sacrificed itself trying to save them. So it was kind of like this really, really sad scene.
Yeah,
just at the end.
It's really sad. And, and of course it has the main characters, they're standing there looking upset, kind of realizing what had just happened because they saw it all in front of them. Like you said, I think the tone of this final scene is really good. It has an impact.
That's one thing I do appreciate by these movies. It's never, whenever they do defeat any of these monsters, like in Godzilla, maybe not Godzilla Raids Again, but this one and Godzilla, it's not like this big hurrah, we defeated the monster, everything's going to be okay now. It's kind of like, because Rodan, I mean, it wasn't this evil monster. It was just a bird that was underground, and all it knows is just it's just going by this animal instincts. It doesn't know that it's causing all this destruction.
Exactly. Like even like his Rodan's damage is so unconnected because he's not even in there destroying. It's literally his wings flapping and destroying things. He does go in and end up destroying things once they start attacking, but at first, it's completely unbeknownst to him. He's just literally flying, and it's sad in a way for his downfall. And
another thing I do like is the worldwide sort of feel of this movie, at least in Asia, it felt like, because Rodan, there's there's Rodan sightings in China, there's one in Singapore. Because Rodan flies so fast, it can get to all these different countries, and whereas Godzilla is kind of landlocked to Japan.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I thought that was really interesting because, I guess I never expected that to them they had a whole scene where somebody was speaking in Chinese, and I saw that and I thought that was really interesting. You're right, that's a good thing to bring up.
Couple of behind the scenes thing. They reused a lot of Rodan's destruction scenes. They actually reused it for another movie called Valley of the Dragons.
Okay.
Never heard of it, but one shot I do like too was the scene where Rodan is kind of seen in the cave, underneath the ground, before they started shooting at the ground, and you can kind of see Rodan's shadow, kind of peeking through the shadows a little bit. I like that one a lot.
Oh, before we forget, I do want to bring up another scene I thought was really cool. It popped in my head when the ground is having an earthquake. And the dirt is piling into the cracked ground. Just the look of that was awesome. Thought the look of that was really cool. I wanted to say that.
Yeah, I really like the scenes where they actually can get that kind of earth looking type of feel, and it's just kind of separating in half, those really old earthquake type of movies where it's just these fault lines are kind of forming and things.
Yeah. There's something just so cool about the practicalness of it. You see this and it just looks, it's real. There's something so cool about it.
It is kind of cool watching that, knowing that somebody actually had to destroy fake-looking ground, and now it's just a computer does it. No big deal.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks fine on computers, but, there's nothing like the real deal.
One last fact I want to bring up is Rodan's roar.
Oh, yeah, Rodan's roar, yeah, which is I guess, to me, the first time I heard it, it is, I don't even know how to say it. It's gross sounding. It's really scary sounding. But I know how was that sound made?
I actually really enjoyed his roar. And this is what it sounded like, Nathan. So how they did that sound just now was actually... So you kind of hear Rodan kind of doing these weird kind of chirping noises, a little bit, when he first starts roaring. That is actually the sound of people talking, and it's actually sped up ridiculously fast. And
that's really cool.
Also too, they got the same instrument they did with Godzilla, which was a double bass. Did the same thing, and they did the same method, and but it was kind of sped up versus slowed down.
Gotcha. It sounds so different to me. It really does. But it makes sense that that's what they would just be like, okay, this worked last time, let's do it again. But there's something about, I guess, the way they sped it up that made it sound like, I don't know. It is kind of a nerve-wracking sound.
It is, but I agree. I was like, oh, that sounds so different. And then when I read it, I'm like, oh, it's the same thing, except it just was they just distorted it differently.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, cool. Well, we'll see if they do that again with their other monsters. They just pull out the old faithful double bass.
I mean, who doesn't have a double bass lying around in their house?
We all do, for all my movie shoots and film productions.
Actually, real quick, I'm just going to say this real fast too. There was actually like a guy, in a modern day video, he was actually recreating Godzilla's roar. Mm-hmm. He actually had like a double bass, and he was doing it. And it actually does sound like an animalistic type of noise, like a grumbling type of animal noise, like the one he was doing it. So it was really cool to see that, that it's still very much achievable doing that same type of effects.
No, that's awesome. You can make your own Godzilla sound at home.
Yep, just get your double bass out, like I said.
Yeah.
But I think that's all I have to add. I'm sure I'm going to be pounding myself later because I'm going to forget something, but for now, I think that's all I have, unless you got anything else.
No. I mean, I want to say that I'm missing something too, but I think overall, this is my feelings on the movie. And as usual, Ryan, you got some great facts. You got, your Godzilla, you got it down. So yeah.
I try my best. There's a lot of great source material. David Klatt's book, again, is very good and has a wealth of knowledge to it. And if I didn't make it clear enough, it's not my favorite one of the series, but I still think it's a very strong entry into the series, and it's definitely better than Raids Again.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's better than Raids Again. I might have some negatives, but I think the last 30 minutes with Rodan are awesome and elevate this movie totally. So
yeah, and I highly suggest just to go watch, even if you're not interested in the movie, just kind of watch the scenes where just look up Rodan City Destruction, and there's some really cool looking stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that is it. And as we close this chapter on Toho, and we will be digging back into that again at some point. But on Tuesday, Nathan, what are we going to be talking about?
So on Tuesday, we're actually doing another recommendation. We got a recommendation from my uncle, Josh. He recommended Low from 2009. So yeah, that one is available on YouTube. You can watch it right on YouTube. Very easy if you want to join in with us.
Sounds perfect. I can't wait. But if you got some Low memories, or you got some memories from Rodan or any other movies that you think we should talk about in the future, or just what you think about the podcast, shoot us an email at driveindoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at DIDFpod. But until next time.
Until next time.